Hello, everybody, and welcome to this next Try This planning group, and welcome to you all. So in this session, we're going to talk about Key 2 and we experience the action. And if either of you have had a go and want to talk about that, that would be your opportunity. If not, that's fine. We'll just have more time to talk about the other key, which is key 3, solve a clue, which is what we're going to talk about in more depth during this session. John, you start.
And just to say that I was really interested to follow you through in the recording that I watched. I haven't actually had a go at following your process, but I have my own Where the Wild Things Are, coming from a different stance, which is Grandad, who's Max's granddad, and his daughter writes to him saying, "I just don't know what to do." He goes stumping up the stairs, the dog comes down, "Help, help, help." And
Love
so
it.
I've approached it from meeting them as granddad and talking about granddads, and then approaching the narrative through him writing to her and reliving the moments in the story before having, of course, the Wild Rumpus, which involved the parents who came into the primary school that I was working in at that time as well. So it's lovely to see that and to go, ooh.
Yeah, it's such a great book, isn't it? It's such a rich. I still think it's probably the best children's book ever written.
To encounter a boy like this, what would you do? Like being a passenger from a boat. And so they began to produce and get involved with the story. Then we went on to the narrative of the author. And then there's another part when this boy is on his room, and he's got a lot of coins. And so let's all be this little boy, and you have a lot of coins in your hand. What would you do?
Yeah, nice.
How do you see them? What are your thoughts about what you would do with the money? That was my plus. So it was a very good opportunity to employ both of them in several parts of the story.
Nice. And this was with adults?
Yeah, this
adult
was with
students.
Yeah.
Great. And last night our time, we heard a teacher talking about some year 1 students, so 5-year-olds. And it was interesting because her moment was someone holding some money and asking, what are you going to do with it now? So it's interesting, isn't it? The parallels, those threshold moments, those moments of potential, those moments where there are lots of possible futures. Tim and I have talked about this. There are these little threshold moments that we find ourselves in drama that are really useful, like holding money in your hand and wondering what to do with it. That's a wonderful threshold moment, isn't it? You know, about to step on board ship and set off for another country. That's a threshold moment. I think there's some work to be done on threshold moments. Someone's probably done it, but there are these moments that are full of potency and possible futures. So you get lots of pluses in those, don't you? Hello, Tim. Welcome back.
Hello. I'm so glad that it carried on without me.
It didn't record.
No,
but it did.
But I thought we were all going to get cut off, and then we were going to have to reassemble. My internet crashed, and so I'm now using my phone. So that's
okay.
Anyway, here we are. We're back again. So I heard Ulysses obviously this morning, so that's great. I know what he did, that wonderful work. Is that everything for this conversation, for looking at key 2? Should we move on to key 3? I'm asking Viv, really.
Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to talk about?
Just using that key when it came to story writing this week. So we are reading Charlotte's Web as our class reader this term. and the children are rewriting their version of Templeton's adventure when he goes to the fairground. And we were imagining what it would be like to be a rat and having to move around that space. So it was a very interesting moment for people to walk in on, and the children were kind of slinking around the room, and it was a good way to develop the vocab as well. So rather than he just walked across the fair, we're talking about like scuttled and slinking, and tied a bit of alliteration with it. So they were really enjoying it, and it was a nice break from the sat down writing the entire paragraph. We kind of stopped in the middle of it. So yeah, it worked that way really well.
And did you find, so the age of the children, Lisa, just so everybody knows? How old
So I'm
are
year 4.
Year 4, which is how old?
8 and 9.
8 and 9. So did you find that getting them up and doing things inactively, did that help with their expressions, with their writing, with the way
Yeah, it did. It really helped them get in the headspace of the character as well, because for them, a few of them didn't understand why a rat would be motivated to do it.
Right.
So it was interesting to get them into that headspace and kind of draw them into the story themselves and become that character. So yeah, it was really successful.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Right, so I'm just going to share my screen for some while.
And while Tim does that, just a gentle reminder from me, because I'm really keen to build up this resource of shared planning ideas. So if you have a moment and you can try this site and just take a moment to summarize the way you've used the keys, I think teachers are really enjoying visiting that shared pool of resources, and it really illustrates how the keys can bring to life so many contexts. So I definitely encourage you to do that. Or if that's too tricky, just flick me a quick email and with a couple of sentences, and I'll put it up for you.
Yeah, in particular, just it doesn't have to be great long detail or anything.
No,
Just a couple of photographs can say loads, and we're going to look at a photograph now which illustrates that, and bits of the children's writing or anything really. That's really what teachers like to look at, don't they? So this key is called Solve a Clue, and the idea from it, in terms of the example that I talk about, comes from a classroom of a teacher called Nicola Winter. And here she is in the corner of the slide here, working with her class, who are year 2. And you can see in the middle of this group is a nest and if you look very closely, you can see something green and shiny in the middle of it. And that's an egg. It's about this sort of size. And Nicole has made this egg for the purposes of this story that they're developing together. So when Viv and I were writing Try This, and we got to this key, and it emerged out of what we were doing, and I was sort of thinking of an example. I thought about this lesson because it was something that I'd seen, and this photograph is one of my most favorite photographs for looking at children using this work. I just think it just says so much about how the work operates in the classroom and how it engages the children and the different place that the teacher can take themselves to. So you can see, oh, she's out on the edge here, and she's sort of talking to 2 or 3 students that are close to her who need a bit of extra support, while the rest of them are all kind of busy and independent and kind of working on what they're working on. So this is the purpose of the key, really, in terms of the thinking behind it, actually, rather than the purpose. The thinking behind it is to generate curiosity. And so what you're doing is you're using a mysterious object, or a series of mysterious objects. Viv this morning talked about a series of objects that were used in a classroom to create a mystery, something that was happening. And it's one of the key kind of hooks for children is curiosity. In fact, it's not just children, it's for all of us human beings. We are curious species, curious people, curious beings, and we are attracted to things that aren't explained to us, things that we kind of have to unpack and unravel for ourselves. So one of the key ideas behind this is not to give too much away, but to sort of lure them in, as it were, sort of attract them into the situation. And at the center of that, in this key, is what we've called this morning. I've got this right, a boundary object, something that's on the boundary. Could you say a bit more about that, Viv? What you meant by that?
Well, yeah, it just kind of came into my head really when I was talking this morning, that one of the bits of theory I've read about moving children between the real world and imagined worlds is that there are these objects that sort of exist in both worlds, that they take you between the two like a passport. And so it's clearly something, the egg is clearly something that's been made by the teacher in the real world, but is an invitation, a thing that you can hold in your hand and believe, agree to believe as part of an imagined world. So it carries you across the border like a passport into that imagined world. And when we were talking in the last session, it occurred to me that is what happens in something like Encounter Someone, but the boundary object there is the teacher, the role that the teacher takes. But there's something more concrete about an object, isn't there? And it's something that speaks for itself, because it literally doesn't speak or move usually. And so there's a whole lot more intrigue and potential, and it's more of a threshold thing, because there are lots of things that egg could be. So it's another of those threshold moments, and the object takes you across the boundary of that threshold.
Yeah, and I was thinking, John, in the example that you were giving about the wild things, is that the sort of the granddad is a sort of a threshold, a role, isn't it? Someone who's, they're meeting the granddad, and that's taking them into the world of the story, which is then going to become revealed to them. So, is anything really that exists as a contact point, I suppose, between the real world and the story world? And of course, there's an idea very much taken from theatre and other kinds of forms of story making. So we had a brief conversation this morning about what kinds of objects this key could use, and in the example that I'm going to talk about, it's actually an object like the one in the photograph here that was created by the teacher. So something physical made out of paper mache and shiny paper and whatnot. But it could be a poster or a newspaper, but it would be something that would be created in advance. So there are other keys later on where the boundary object is created in front of the children or created with the children. They're similar kinds of things. They have a kind of there are obviously things that are similar to this. But this thing, that what's distinctive about this key, or one of the things that's distinctive about this key, is the fact that it is made in advance, and it looks authentic. It looks like something that could be real in that fiction. So there is a danger here, and again, this was something that we talked about this morning. That if you're not careful, the children might think that it's real. So because they might not be able to tell the difference between something that's real and something that's not. And in our minds, as adults, we might think, well, that's an obviously, an egg this side covered in shiny paper, that can't be real. But sometimes the willing suspension of disbelief is such that it's that children might think it's real, or more likely they're confused by the teacher acting as though it is. So if the teacher pretends that this is a real thing and encounters it with the children as if it's just kind of arrived in the classroom or wherever from somewhere, and they're kind of going, oh, goodness me, look what we found, you know. And you know, imagine if they sort of, the children had come into the classroom with the teacher and Nicole had said, wow, what's this, goodness me, what's happened here. The children would be confused. They wouldn't understand necessarily that where they were in this. So it's important to guide them in, and in a moment we'll go through the language that's used in this example and the step itself to talk about how that happens. One thought about this that I've had over the years is that in theatre, in particular, but also cinemas. I mean, I went to watch a film last night, and you sit down in seats, and there isn't a curtain anymore, but the lights are up, and then there is a clear signal that the film is about to begin. You know, like obviously you know, the screen lights up and the lights dim, and that's a sign that the film's about to start. And they actually say to you, don't they, turn your phones off and watch the film, basically. Right. Well, if in a classroom you don't signal the fiction clearly enough, there is a danger that the conventions that are used in theatre and other forms to signal the start of a story are not clear enough for the children, and it can become muddied. So let's.
And can I add to that, Tim?
Yes, please go ahead.
In fact, because I'm listening to you, and this is something we've talked about a lot, and it's something I'm very passionate about, because as I mentioned in the other video, I kind of had some experiences as a child where I was deceived and something was presented as real where it wasn't, and it was very, very confusing. It was quite an odd, surreal experience, actually. I've written a paper about it, which I might stick up on the website for people to look at. But you're saying, you know, there are clear signals in theatre, and you're right. It's sometimes it's a curtain, but actually theatre happens in lots of places, and some theatre makers play around with not signalling it because they want to play with that relationship. But I was just thinking as she spoke there, imagine a teacher saying to the children, come to the class because there seems to be something. I don't know what it is. What do you think? That just appeared this morning when I arrived in the classroom. That's not just not signaling it. That's not just not signaling that it's a story. It's actually signaling that it's a piece of enchantment. It's do you know what I mean? It's not a lack of signaling, it's an actual signaling of something else. It's saying this is magic, strange, and I don't know what it is. And frankly, that's telling a lie. If the children, I mean, if there's other big signals going on, like a little wink or a little ooh, you know, that the children might pick up. But I think what a lot of teachers want to do is they kind of want to signal something enchanting or interesting, but they end up signaling that you know, I've heard a lot of people say, well, we're going to have a visitor today. Someone's coming from the space agency, and they're talking to us about a job they want us to do. And that is literally saying to the children, there's going to be a visitor to the classroom who's from the, like, no, there's not. So it's not just that they are failing to show the signals, they're directly signaling something that is not true. So I think that's why we're so clear on that.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you for that, because I think you're right. It's not that you can't. I mean, I was talking to somebody who goes around and does immersive theatre in schools. Literally this Friday, we had a long conversation, and part of the conversation was about this. And it's a clear dividing line between what him and his team are doing and what we're doing. In his team there's a kind of a contract that we're entering into an immersive theatre experience, and he says there's various things that they do to protect the children in and out of that. That's not really how this works. This is much more in the terms of a contracted co-creation of something that is clearly a fiction from the start. It's explicitly made clear to the children that we're creating a fiction, and it's not a real thing, or we're not even.
And the most important things for teachers to feel is to trust us that it doesn't spoil it.
Right.
It doesn't spoil it. It makes it better. It makes it better in terms of our objectives, which are teaching and learning. And it really does feel quite disappointing. I still feel it as a teacher when I'm being explicit to children about the fact that something is, the little child in me is disappointed that this isn't magic. But if we do that, we can get on with, you know, because we're there for the children to be powerfully positioned co-constructors of this, not kids sitting there with their eyes on stalks going, oh, what's going on? This is wow. That's not what we're going for, is it? We're going for you know, critical, aware thinking, inquiring minds.
Would you mind if I just joined in quickly there?
I
take the point you're making exactly about that, and a lot. And, you know, for my granddad piece, it was talking about granddads first, and I did a drawing, and they drew with me, you know, stereotypical granddads, and then I got my dad's old cardigan and signaled, you know, the beginning of moving into role. I think that's a beginning way in, but I think we have the responsibility at the end as well to remind ourselves of where we've been and who we are and what's happened to us. So I try to hold a bookending process in my head for that.
I like that, John. Good point. Right. You know, de-rolling and during sometimes too. You can really explicitly signal. Last time I did the monster one, a child, it had all been clearly signaled. We'd been on pretend phones. They knew they were going into a story. They still said to me, oh, you know, and they went, this is freaky. You know, they were interpreting it as quite real. So during it, we're going, I said, lucky it's a story, isn't it? It's a story, you know, so little reminders of safety and parameters.
I think absolutely you're right, John. That's exactly the difference, that you're talking to them as John, and then you say, when I put this on, I'm going to be granddad, and it's clear that when you do that, then you're now operating or representing somebody within a fiction. That's completely different to kind of walking in or being introduced as Max's granddad and the children just being completely, well, what's going on here? Who's this chap? I don't know what's going on, and everything. They get all confused about the dividing line between fact and fiction. Okay, let's
and your point about coming out of role, John. I mean, if people are watching, I don't know that it isn't explicitly stated in the key. So if people are watching, I think that is a good thing. It says reflect on what it was like to be inside the story, but it might be worth saying, you know, clearly signal the end of the story and then reflect on what it was like to be in there, because that's your point, isn't it? It's bookending.
Right. Right.
Thanks, Tim.
So briefly, these are the benefits of this key. As I say, it's about stimulating curiosity, imaginative thinking, and problem solving. So as you'll see, there's a situation that's created, and then the teacher doesn't know how to sort this out, or the person that the teacher's representing doesn't know how to sort this out. So it will create those opportunities. It helps to develop questioning, inference, and story making skills. And as we've already said, it's important for the teacher not to trick the students into thinking it's real. We'll talk a little bit about the limitations and the other links and things after we've talked through the steps, because I'd prefer to spend a proper amount of time on that before we look at those things. So here, this is the steps as they are in the example that we're going to look at of the mysterious. Is it called the mysterious egg?
It is.
Mysterious egg. Okay, so starts very simply, bring the children together. Can I ask you to come over here and make a circle? And then you're going to explain, you're going to show them something in a fiction, something you've chosen or created for the purpose of creating a story. So imagine that sitting there with the egg that in the photograph that we just looked at. I'm going to show you something I made last night. It's a bit of a mystery, and I thought we could use it to start a story. So that's what we've been talking about. That's explicitly telling them, this is something I made, and we're going to use it in a story. Then the next thing is that when they're looking at this thing within the story, they're not looking at it as children. So this next step is the step of casting them in role, or giving them a role within the fiction. So I'm going to ask you to look at this object as if you were a team of scientists who've been called in to examine the object and decide what it might be. Now, that might obviously need unpacking a little bit with the children in terms of what are scientists, what do scientists do, you know, what are the jobs of scientists, you know, what kinds of equipment do scientists use. You know, in the picture that you saw, they had clipboards and paper. Well, they didn't just suddenly arrive. That was obviously something that the teacher had planned with the children, and they knew how to use this, and they talked about all the kinds of different kinds of skills that scientists have, you know, observation, record keeping, you know, being clear and systematic in what they do, and all that stuff. And one of the, just to sort of digress slightly, one of the things that happened in that session, that in that photograph, was that the children were, because they were a team of investigators actually, but similar to scientists, but they were very certain about not touching the egg. So they came in and they were observing it, because that was a clearly part of the work that they were doing. But they had lots of conversations with each other about not touching it. Don't get too near, they were saying to each other. But we'll just sit back and just look carefully. We don't want to get too near, because they'd already started to think of themselves at that point as people with responsibility. And they were thinking obviously about what would lay something like this. You know, where was the mother? And the fact that if you touch something and you interfere with it, that changes things, and that really wasn't what they wanted to do. And then a little while in, one of them said, "There's a crack," like that, and the others were going, "What?" On the other side, they couldn't see he said, "There's a crack. I can see a crack," and they were going, "What's it like?" And they said, "Well, it's sort of coming down the side here," and they were like, "Oh," and they all put it onto their drawings and their bits of recording that they were doing. So there was a lot of that sort of thing that was happening, which wouldn't have happened, I don't think, certainly not in the same way. I try not to be too certain about this, but I don't think would have happened if they hadn't been cast in the role of investigators and scientists. It's something about that responsibility, and obviously we're getting into the world of Madeline the expert here, that makes a difference to the way that the children are looking at the egg. So the next step, step 4, is to describe the location where this event is taking place. So again, this is the teacher. This object was found at the back of a cave by a caver who was exploring a newly discovered cave system. It's not being touched, and we are the first person to properly examine it. So that step is about placing the object itself within a story world. So now here we've got the location, the place where this object was found, and the people that found it. So it's got a bit of a backstory to it as well. So again, this is all about building the world around it, using the 6 elements of story making, which are characters, locations, events, time, tension, and focus, which are outlined in the introduction to the book. So step 5, give the students something to make notes with, which you saw in the photograph. I expect you want to make some notes, so please take one of these clipboards, some handing out things. Now the students are now sitting around the object, and you want to build some tension. So this is the step that all those other steps of preparation. This step, as you see, is a step using this narrator's voice, which takes them into the world of the story. As the team crept towards the back of the cave, darkness surrounded them like a cloak. The light of their torches reflected back off something shiny, something extraordinary. And then the students see the mysterious egg lying in a nest of twigs and leaves. It was a giant egg, so you might have it covered up, I suppose. I don't know, whatever you want to do. It was a giant egg with a reflective shell lying in a nest of twigs and leaves. Now, that, as well as using this narrator voice, which Viv and I talk about in the book, there's also here the dramatic imagination, movement and stillness, darkness and light, sound and silence, and you'll see that, once you know it's there, you can see it in the piece of writing. So one of the things about this key, and in fact it props up in an awful lot of the keys that we wrote and became really a big part of what we were trying to do, was that writing these little bits of script. Now, I know, Lisa, you've sort of done things like this as well, haven't you? Where you sort of, in your planning, you actually explicitly write like a paragraph in the voice of a storyteller, and because it has this kind of, I want to avoid the word magic. Viv, help me out here. What's the proper sort of word for what it's doing in the classroom?
Well, I don't know. Maybe, but I think magic's fine. It's really beguiling. It's really enchanting. But as you were going through those 6 steps with us, I was imagining being a child going through those 6 steps, and I was thinking, by the time I hear that magic, evocative language, I have questions and I'm curious, but I don't have any questions about cave. What cave? I don't have any. The team. What team? I don't have any. Egg. What egg? I don't have any problems of framing this. All I've got is curiosity and wonder about what's going to happen next. So we've by taking those other 5 steps, we do allow magic. It is magic, but it's not. It's in the right place. I think claim the magic. When I watch you do things
John,
like this,
you're nodding as well. Yeah.
Yeah, when I watch you do things like this, Tim, there's magic in the room, but it's the right kind.
As long as it's not lazy magic, it's okay.
Right. What's the difference between lazy and not lazy magic?
Well, it's I think it's a term that Peter Slade uses quite a bit, and it's a con magic, as opposed to creating the magical atmosphere. Right. This is what you're doing through your narrator's voice here.
Right.
I love that, John. I love that idea of con magic. I think that articulates, this has always been a major personal thing for me, because I experienced as a child the equivalent of walking into a room and someone just starting there. I had that experience multiple times, and I know the teachers' intentions were good. There was a lot of atmosphere, there was a lot of everything, but it was very freaky. And it was a con, and I did not feel excited about what happened next. I felt confused and small and intimidated, and it wasn't a positive thing. It was almost a little bit traumatic, actually, especially with the one that involved coming around the corner in the forest and a man had a hatchet embedded in his leg and blood everywhere. That was actually quite a big thing to encounter when you think it's reality. So yeah, I love that. It's carefully leading them towards proper magic.
It's interesting. Where did the thing about con magic come from? Who was it? Slade.
Peter Slade in his work, and more than the con, he argues, I think quite properly, against the lazy magic that just goes, we all woke up and it was a dream. Dealing with something which is real.
Yes.
Yeah.
The dealing is the important thing. Who are we? Where are we? What's happening to us? What are we going to do about it?
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, I shan't worry about using the word magic from now on. Then I think if it's good enough for Slade, it's good enough for anybody. I suppose I was a bit hesitant about words without defined meaning. It kind of, they're one of these sort of words that could be a bit sort of woolly, or a bit sort of uncertain about what we mean by that. And also magic, of course. I mean, Viv will tell you that I had real problems with the word hook. We won't go into why, but she convinced me that you noticed that I used it earlier, because I'm convinced now that it is a properly good word for what happens. But magic it does have a connotation, doesn't it, of hiding something, it's sort of, I'm going to do magic and you're going to experience magic, but you won't be the person who knows how the magic works. And that's not how this is. It's an inclusive, it's a sense, an event that we are all experiencing. And this is one of the means of which we can evoke that, I suppose, magical sort of situation.
I think another synonym that I would use, it's not a synonym, but another word for what is going on here is the aesthetic. You know, it's crafted. You mentioned in passing the 6 elements are all present. So the teacher in these 6 steps, literally we've gone, who are we, where are we, you know, the element of role, the characters, the time, the place, what is going on, what's up, and what are we going to do about it. Those are ways of describing what we call the 6 elements, and it's crafted, and then it's using the skill of the language. So it takes us to an aesthetic experience. I think that might be what we're reaching for here.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Yeah, no, that's right. Gosh, that was quite a lot, wasn't it? Anyway, so that's step 6. We shall carry on. Now, up till this point, you'll notice that the teacher has done all the work, pretty much. The children have been listening and following and being involved in that sense, but there hasn't been any co-creation. There hasn't been any opportunity or invitation from the teacher for the students to become part of the story making process. Step 7 does that. So step 7 says, what do you make of that? So you've got the egg in front of them, but what do you make of that is an enormously open-ended question, because of course there's what do you make of the story? What do you make of the people? What do you make of what's happening? What do you make of the thing in front of you? The whole thing is, what do you make of that? And in my experience, if you get this right and that builds up in the way that we've talked about, and you get the magic, the aesthetic, that question, what do you make of that, is like a spark that travels out of the work and into the children, and you get lots of thinking, lots of talking, lots of observations, and lots of things that you're in the place of, oh right, that's interesting. You say a little bit more about that, and what makes you say that? And of course, their main focus of their attention in this example is going to be, well, it will be in the other, it will be in all of them, because there'll be a boundary object. So it will be the thing in front of them will be the main focus, and there'll be lots of speculation and lots of thinking about what it might be and why it might be here in a cave, who might have left it there, might they come back, how long has it been here for? I mean, all these questions are going to be generated, and they're going to come out of a situation like this.
And if I can talk about that question, Tim, it's one I noticed early on when I was observing you teaching that you use a lot, and it is a different question from what do you think?
Yeah.
It's a different question from how are you feeling? It's a really different question from what is it? Right. It's actually one of those go-to questions. If almost, it's a threshold question. What do you make of that? Because it's you individually, you collectively. It's a wonderful question. Full of possibility. And if you see on the left-hand side of the slide, it says ask the students to discuss their first observations. If you haven't got that model question, you might find yourself saying things like, so what are your first observations? Right. Or what do you notice? Would you like to discuss with your partner what this is? Those are different questions than what do you make of that? That's a kind of handing over moment. It is a really important question, and you'll notice it comes up in a lot of our keys. It's almost like that's the transition point from the setup to the moment of ownership and responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah. It's one of these things that that I think that language in the work that we do, I'm sure you'll agree, John, is that language is the main tool that we use, and it's a precise tool. As you say, Viv, just a tiny shift in the language, could make all the difference. It's just so getting these things right. and Lisa, we've talked about this in the planning, is writing these things, almost scripting them out and rehearsing them in advance. And there's various tools and things for doing this. Is so important, because when it comes to those bits, there's lots of other things where you can be general and you can sort of, obviously you're sort of reacting in the moment, but a question like that will make a big difference to where and how things develop. So step 8 is you're engaged in this conversation. Of course, you're going to support them, and you're going to say things to generate, obviously listen to what they say, and if there's things that hasn't occurred to them, suggest those as well. So what kind of animal would lay an egg this size? Do you think it will come back? We should proceed with caution. Now, we should proceed with caution is another shift in the language, of course, again, because that's the language of which is sort of supporting the children into moving in forward in terms of the developing narrative. So we should proceed with caution is saying we, meaning us, the scientists, should proceed with caution, which is a bit of guidance, a little bit of gentle support about how we go forward on this, without you've got to resist the anything that kind of sounds teachery. That's a word that Dorothy would use.
Totally.
Because you're not in that place anymore.
It's also the first time I've noticed this, was the first time now looking at it, it's the first time the teacher casts themselves alongside the team.
Yes.
They might, I can't remember exact wording in the previous step, but it's very clear. It's a very different statement again from, okay, so show me what a scientist would do at a moment like this.
Yeah, no.
Which is quite a sort of a traditional drama-y kind of question. We should proceed with caution, people. Is you're in with them. We're in this together. It's that good old tension coming back as well.
Right. So again, I think this is going back to different ways that you can use role. So John was describing, very informatively about when you've got a full role and you're going to be coming into the fiction as a person, as a clearly identified person. So when I put this jumper on, I'm going to be Grandad. That's full role. It's very clear who this role is, and they're identified and named, and they've got a purpose. This role, we should proceed with caution. As you say, Viv, it's one of the team. But it's not a defined role. It's just in the linguistic shift. Not to get too technical about this, but it's just a little shift in the way that we're using language, which is saying we're all this, we're all together, we're part of a team, and I'm now part of the team with you, without actually saying I'm now going to be part of the team.
Or I'm now going to adopt a shadow role.
Well. Absolutely, don't say that.
Yeah, you don't have to do that.
that would be utterly confusing.
You signal grandpa, you signal the full role, but you don't signal it. You don't go, oh, listen to what I'm going to do now.
Right, exactly. It's all these little kind of subtle little shifts that that just kind of make the whole thing kind of flow, because you're not explaining yourself. There's no need to explain yourself. If you say we should proceed with caution, what should we do next? It's clear that you're saying, I'm with you on this. I'm with you. I don't know what to do. And I don't sound like a teacher. A teacher would say, put your hand up if you want to tell me what, if you've got an idea about what they should do next, or something like that. That would be distancing and a teacher move. Whereas this is much more of a kind of, well, we're in this together now, because you've got it set up. Suggest it's time to record what they can see. Now, if there was, and I'm not suggesting that every lesson plan should have one of these, but if there was a learning objective, which at the start of the lesson said, this is what the children are going to learn today, right? Then it would be a piece of observational writing. That's what they were going to be doing. And now, of course, that's perfectly fine. I'm not knocking it. I mean, I'm sounding like I'm knocking it and being a bit silly about it, but it's just that it's there is an opportunity here for a piece of writing, and it's very clearly here. Now, for the children, making a kind of doing a piece of writing is one of those things that actually is if you're not careful, can feel a bit pointless, a bit like this is what we go to school and then we do it. Dorothy Heathcote called it the waiting room classroom, where you go in, your classrooms are like waiting rooms, she said, if you're not careful, where children are doing things, but they're not doing them for today. They're doing them for some time in the future when they're going to need it. You know, writing. If you sort of say we're gonna write some, we're gonna write notes, and these notes are going to become a report that we're going to send off. I mean, I don't know if you ever did this, but at school I used to spend all my time going, why am I doing this? What's the point of this? You know, it was all sort of like, well, you're in school. That's what you do in school. Okay, but it wasn't terribly motivating. Or indeed gave the work much purpose. As the screen disappeared at your end, because it's disappeared at mine. I think it might just have turned.
No, you've just gone to the next slide.
Okay, all right. I've just gone on to the next slide. Okay, I'll try and get it back in a minute once I've finished talking about this bit. So the waiting room, she says, are dreaded. These are things that kind of put a dampener on the children's learning, because they're saying that the work we're doing today will be important sometime in the future. So what she said, what you want to do is you want the work that they're doing to have meaning and purpose now, that it's important and urgent. And this importance and urgency thing is all to do with purpose. It's why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this because we're scientists and we found this egg. Now, of course, any one of them could put their hand up and go, we're not scientists. You've duped us. Now, the reason they don't, like, oh, we don't want to do any writing. You've done the whole thing to make us do some writing. The reason it's never happened to me, not once. And the reason it doesn't is because they're invested in it.
They do sometimes go, you've got us doing maths here, haven't you? I have had that. Do you remember I told you the story of little Braveheart?
Yeah,
and his real name in real life was Braveheart, and he snuck up to me and he said, you've actually got us doing maths, haven't you? And I said, well, we are doing maths. And then he said, sneaky. Then he went gleefully back to doing it.
Brilliant. Right, well, because he'd seen the sleight of hand. He'd seen what you were doing. But the important thing again there was he went back and did it.
Oh, and he was admiring. He was like, I see what you're doing. I see you, teacher. I see you.
Yes. I'm just going to pull out my screen because I've got a second screen here. For some reason, I'm going to remember this tonight because this is when all the technology is letting me down. So if the slides disappear, I'll get them back up.
We're almost done. We've got about 2 minutes left, Tim.
Oh, right. Okay. Gosh, I didn't realize we were. Can you still see the slides then?
No, we can see you.
Right. Let's see if
it's okay. If you can see them, you can talk to us about what was on.
No, I can't see the slides, so I'll just get them up and then I'll talk. It's very near the end anyway. So
I think you were going to tell us talk us through. Oh, is there a final step?
There is just one more thing. So it says, let's make some notes. Do you think we should draw the egg? What about measuring it? I brought along some tape measures. So there's that there. And then the last step is, I wonder what's going to happen in this story. Why don't you head back to your tables and take out your writing books? Let's see what kinds of things happen to the scientists and the giant egg. So that's an invitation to write a story. But of course, it could be a report, could end up as a newspaper report, could be, I don't know, any number of different things. And the point being that for the children, those things will have meaning and purpose, and they'll be important and urgent now because of the work that's been done in building up to it. that's the end of that example. So as you say, Viv, we are 1 minute away from the end. Did you just want to you've reminded everybody about the website and putting examples up on the website, and the last slide, did you want to say any more about that, or is that?
Yeah, there was one thing that you said you were going to go back to, which was limitations and links and things. Was there anything urgent burning to say?
No, not really. I think the limitations, what I think that the danger in this, the risk, if you like, probably a risk is better than a danger, is this the danger of or the risk of confusing the children or it not being clear. But we talked about that, I think in detail. You know, there is a certain amount of preparation involved in this key, which in the other keys generally there isn't very much preparation involved. So there is a bit of that. I suppose that is a limitation. I think you talked about that, didn't you, this morning?
I did, but I also think it's great because once you've got your mysterious egg, you've got your mysterious egg lesson that you can carry from place to place to place. And as teachers, we sometimes need those grab bag. John is nodding vigorously, you know, and in fact, I have my clues in a bag here, and it's often a go-to if I'm invited to do something at short notice or something like that. So I actually think that's an advantage as well as a disadvantage. And some teachers just love having a beautifully made thing or a crafted thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, it depends whether that's your thing or not, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and clearly Nicole, that, you know, she produces some beautiful things, and I know other teachers who I see on Twitter, you know, they photograph the things that they make and they make some wonderful things. It's not my strong suit.
It's not me either. No.
Lisa's shaking her head. No, I'm bits of paper and fat felt tip pens. That's me on that.
But that does mean that when you pull out the beautifully made thing, the kids kind of go, whoa, because it's different. It's, you know, you and I don't have a Pinterest classroom. So when a thing, a beautifully selected or created thing arrives, there is a kind of wonderment to that. So it kind of, what I told myself.
I'm in awe of people who do things. I think it's fantastic, and people who incorporate music as well, and all that kind of thing. It's something I wish that I could do, but I don't have that particular skill. So that's that key. So before we meet again, which I can't see, is the 4th of February. Is that right?
4th of February.